Hello. So the Bible is full of many wonderful stories, right? But and I always say, read it in its entirety. Take the time to read it for yourself. Don't just accept the snippets, and the little pieces and the topical. Read it for yourself. But one place you should read for yourself um, is like if you're reading the book of Exodus, right? So there's this interesting passage here that I really like, and I'm not going to read. I'm not going to read it. I would suggest you read it yourself, but so because it's two whole chapters. So it's chapter 17 and chapter 18. And within this, there is just some interesting things that kind of come together. And I don't know, just kind of there's an interesting the way that God communicates with us, right? So at the beginning of chapter 17, it's the kind of the story where they're in the wilderness and the Israelites are thirsty, they don't have water, and then um, Moses goes to the Lord and is asking God like, what am I to do with these people? They're at the point where they're going to stone me if I don't give them water. And then the Lord tells him, go to this place, I will be there with you, and then take your staff and hit it against this rock, and then I will give water to the people, right? And so the Lord gives him very clear instructions on what to do, right? But then the next little part of that chapter is the battle with Amalek, right? So Amalek comes and Moses tells, I believe, Joshua, like, go and get these people and go battle this guy, right? I'm going to be up here on top of this mountain or this rock watching you. I'm going to bring the staff of the Lord and we'll be up there, right? And there is nothing in there that says that the Lord told him to do this, that, or the other thing. But Moses noticed when he raised his hands above his head. I'm not clear. It just says his hands, but it's possible he was holding the staff. I don't know. But when he had his hands above his head, then the Israelites were doing well in battle. But when he put his hands down, then they weren't doing well. Then Amalek started to be more victorious, right? And so he kept his hands up, and so then because they are realizing this, then someone comes and holds up each of his arms. He sits down so that they can be victorious in this battle, right? And so it's interesting to me because it's never clearly like the Lord said, like, like with the water from the rock, right? Like the Lord gave him really specific instructions on where to go and how to do it. And then this, he's just in battle. They're going ahead in their own um, plans, like, okay, go out and fight them. And then he's realizing for some reason he put his hands up and it was making them victorious. Probably only noticed it was what was making them victorious when he started to put his hands down, and then they didn't. And so it was almost like it wasn't really about so much maybe the hands being up as much as the faith. And so it gave him a focus for his faith. Like, if I keep my hands up, then the Lord is going to keep doing, like, continually having that faith in God. And maybe even as people saw, hey, when his hands are up, then we're being successful, right? Like, then it gives them a focus for their faith too. And so these two people come and hold up his hands because they're like, the Lord's giving us victory, right? Gives them something to hold to keep that faith going, right? But the Lord didn't specifically communicate it, but he made it clear to them somehow. And but then you also notice that, like, going forward in other battles, because this is the one thing, because I have had these kind of things where the Lord gives me something like that, a focus for faith. And um and it's very helpful, it's very useful when I'm trying to have faith in things where it's very hard to have faith, to have something that I can feel like I'm doing to be having faith, to be focusing on the Lord, and to, and but it doesn't mean it. But if every time, like, because going forward every battle you don't see people holding up their hands after this. It's not like they were like, okay, that's what worked, the holding up hands is what worked. It wasn't that. It was for that battle, the Lord was doing something to give them faith, to give them that focus. But if we turn it into every time I'm in a battle, if somebody needs to stand over there and raise their hands, then that becomes more like the pagan beliefs of, like, if we do this, we can control God. So it's like, it's an interesting balance there, but it is something that the Lord does give us focuses for our faith, I believe, to help us keep trusting him, to give us that little something to keep hoping and being engaged in that faith and trusting him actively, right? But then the next thing that happens is in the following chapter is a lot of people are pretty familiar with the story where Jethro comes to visit, and because Jethro has just heard about like that the Israelites have been freed, and so he comes there and hears what's happened and is like, wow, that's amazing, right? And then he sees how things are set up and he asks why are these people all standing around you? Why do you sit here and have everybody come to you, and why are you doing it this way, you know? And when he understands, he says this isn't a good way, and he gives him a better way. So instead, you find like irreproachable people among your people and put them in charge of this much. And, you know, I don't remember exact numbers. I'm just, you know, but so like put this person in charge of 100 people, and that then a person under there that each of them is in charge of 10. And so it like, you know, branches out to like kind of like pyramid marketing kind of like that kind of image, right? Like so that then you're only dealing with the ones that nobody else could do anything about, right? Because for one thing, like, you know, like find other people who the Lord is using also, right? Like, don't let it just be you, right? But anyway, so there was something that the Lord spoke through Jethro to him, like, and I think that sometimes like for me especially, when the Lord has somebody speak something into my life, right? When the Lord brings it information or a new perspective or something I need to know, it's oftentimes somebody very far removed from like the situation, right? Which this guy was, right? Jethro was like, he had only just heard that they'd even been um, freed from Egypt, right? And because when we're all in the like when you have your close like things, right? Like we all get kind of like, it's our own, like we don't see things the same way. It's like the outside perspective. Like for example, if you've ever known somebody in a really destructive relationship, it's really obvious from the outside, but it's not very obvious from the inside, you know, because there's reasons and there's all this stuff and you get used to it, and it's a slow fade kind of thing. Like if you know that song, like it's a little bit of time, you don't realize where the things are going wrong, right? But from the outside, it's like, I think this doesn't look right, right? And so, which is one of the things that is useful about things like, you know, counseling and all that kind of stuff too. But sometimes, like in this situation, it just happened to be somebody, and he wasn't there for all that long. He came and did those things, and he was like praising God that like, you know, that God did this miracle, and then he gave him some advice, and then he left, right? And when he gave him the advice, he also said, that one I can't remember exactly how he phrased it. So let me see here. Um, Now listen to me and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. Like he was saying it in a way that's like, I'm going to give you some advice. I'm like, but let the Lord use this. Like let God use this, right? Um, and uh, and so he received it, and it was just like sometimes the Lord brings those people into our life, and sometimes for me it's been people that they're not actively in my life at all. Like I have an appointment with some person, and I'm not even talking like a counseling appointment or anybody giving me advice. Like I have what was it? An ultrasound or something like that, and then I go in and they say something, and then it strikes something, and then I'm like, oh, huh, I never even heard of that, or I didn't know about that, right? And um, and sometimes for me, it's also been like, especially when like I remember with my son when he was really little, he would say something, and it was like just kind of out of the blue, and it would just the Lord would use it somehow. And I remember thinking, oh, that's like out of the mouth of babes, right? But but so I just love this progression of like the different ways that God can speak and God can guide, right? Because it's not always just one way. Because I mean, obviously Moses was able to go before God and get like some really direct answers from things, like that's how he knew to go and strike the rock and bring the water forth. And then but then he also was tuned to like, okay, hey, whenever I put my arms down, this battle is losing. And then he was also in tune when Jethro came, that Jethro gave him something, and he was like, hey, I this is useful, this is going to help us going forward, right? he the I guess the difference is that sometimes I think we forget that the whole world, all of our life, everything is constantly reflecting, like the Lord is using it constantly. Like every little thing that happens can be the Lord speaking to us. But you have to, we have to have that purity of heart to see it. What is it? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, because he's there already in all of our circumstances all of the time. But when we don't have that purity of heart, and it's not saying because we're dirty filthy sin, but we are busy and we get where we definitely are, we get arrogant, right? We're raised in these school systems and we learn all of these things and our heads full of all of this knowledge, and we really trust this knowledge because it makes sense, it's good, it's tangible, right? But it also can be like, it can take a toll on that purity, because in a way we trust more in the things that we understand and that we can kind of control in a way, or explain, or we feel like makes sense to the way that we've been taught things. And but like when you look at like, because for me, like that's one of the things I love about the story is when he's raising his hands above his head and they're winning the battle, he puts his hands down and they start to lose. There is nothing scientific that can explain that. There's nothing, right? Like it's not a thing that makes sense. It's something they observed and they were like, this is something God is doing. Like, let's keep his arms up, we need to win, right? Like, and so it's like the Lord does that in all kinds of things around us all the time. But if we don't have that, that's because it's purity, but it's also, something about purity that's like simplicity, like that childlike faith thing, like being able to believe like a child. Like, because I always, I hear people talk about childlike faith oftentimes at the same time as they're talking about things that theologians have said. And if you go into the original Greek and all of these things, and I'm like, I feel like childlike faith is a little easier than that, right? Like it's like a little kid. Like I don't have to understand why or how or when, or I just know I trust that he's leading me, that he's doing these things, and that he who has promised is able, right? And it's also that trusting, because one of the things that is a struggle sometimes is trusting that the Lord is every day has something to communicate to me. And that if I'm watching and if I'm paying attention to the things around me, like I've said, he's used a bug on my screen before. And that one he's used a couple times in even deeper messages. I won't even go into all that because it happened a couple times in different ways. And it was just like, he's used people to come to say something at the right time, or to challenge me and make me realize something. And he's used like where I really get that Holy Spirit presence that speaks to me or gives me something in his word. Like even when I was reading this, like saying, notice the different ways, right? Like something that maybe I would have just read through it before, but then when the Lord was like, pay attention to this, isn't this interesting, don't you see, like the Lord will give me more clear direction sometime, or more really like a word, right, rather than just something bring a different understanding, like that observable one, that arms in the air kind of thing. But anyway, I probably said, I don't know about too much, but a lot. And I feel like my ping pong ball is bouncing all over the place because I there's so many other things that connect with this. But I just think it's important to take that perspective of like watching for the Lord and being watchful and expectant and hopeful, like because the Lord is doing like the Lord is, the difference with Moses versus like all of the Israelites is they were like, as soon as they're like thirsty, they're like, we should have just stayed in Egypt. Why'd you take us out here to die here? Whereas Moses is like, okay, Lord, here we are. Like there has to be a resolution, because instead of him saying, why did you take us out of Egypt just to die here? He's saying, I know you took us out of Egypt, and so I know we're not going to die here, So what is it you're going to do? Like he has an expectancy that there is an answer. And so, but I don't know. Anyway, again, ping pong ball is bouncing all over the place, so I'll stop now.